I used to drive the same road home every night after work. Not because it was faster, but because it was empty. No traffic, no lights, just a ribbon of cracked asphalt winding through overgrown fields and patches of woods that had long since given up on being forests. It was the kind of road that felt like it existed outside of time. Always dark, always quiet, always the same. The kind of road that let you think too much. I liked the solitude at first. The way the headlights carved tunnels through the night. The hum of the engine, steady and low. I would roll down the window just a little to let the cool air in, the kind that smelled like wet leaves and old earth. And for a while that was enough. Just me, the dark, and the silence. But then I saw the house. It was late, closer to midnight than I liked. I was already worn thin from the long shift and a string of nights without sleep. My eyes felt heavy, my thoughts even heavier. And maybe that's why I almost didn't notice it at first. It was just a flicker of something on the hill beyond the trees. A warm glow where there had never been one before. I slowed down. There, on the rise just beyond the bend, sat a house. The kind of house with a steep roof and narrow windows and a porch that wrapped around the front like a mouth waiting to speak. Every window was glowing. Not with harsh electric light, but something softer. Like old glass lamps and firelight. Like an old Victorian house. I stared at it as I passed. Aged, yes, but not forgotten. It didn't look new and certainly not abandoned. It looked lived in, settled even. Like it belonged to the land itself, as though it had always been there, quietly waiting to be noticed. But it hadn't. I knew that hill. I had passed it every night for months. Nothing had ever been there. Not a trailer, not a shed, not even a mailbox. Just grass and silence. Now there was this house that normally wasn't there. I kept driving first because I didn't know what else to do. I told myself I was just tired. That maybe I had missed it before. That I was slipping, overworked, underslept, unraveling in ways I didn't want to admit. But even as I said it, I knew better. There was something wrong about it. Something in the way the lights flickered just as I looked away. Something in the way the upstairs curtains moved even though the air outside was perfectly still. Something in how my chest tightened the moment I passed it, like I'd left something behind and wasn't sure if I wanted it back. By the time I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I stood in my kitchen with the fridge door open, holding a glass I didn't remember getting. The house played behind my eyes like a burned-in image. Warm light. Still air. That impossible sense of being seen. I went to bed but didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling breathe in the dark. I listened to my building creak like it was remembering something it hadn't lived through. And sometime around 4 a.m, I sat up and whispered out loud, just to break the silence, that I'd imagined the whole thing. And maybe I believed it. Until the next night. Same road. Same time. Same sky smeared with stars. And there was the house. Just as before. But this time one of the windows was open. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just tightened my grip on the wheel and drove past it, eyes locked on the yellow lines, heart beating too fast and too loud. I felt its presence behind me like a weight. Like a memory I hadn't earned. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the hill was empty. But the light lingered. I didn't plan on going back the next night. That's what I told myself anyway. I left work later than usual, drained and disoriented, the kind of fatigue that dulls your edges and makes decisions feel more like drifting than choosing. I intended to take the main road. I even drove a few blocks in that direction. But when the turn came, the familiar curve that bled into the countryside and disappeared beneath the trees, I took it without hesitation, like my hands already knew where I was going, even if my mind refused to admit it. It wasn't the kind of road people took casually. Too dark. Too forgotten. But I think that's what I needed. Silence. Emptiness. That thin ribbon of asphalt winding through nowhere had always been a kind of buffer. A space between who I had to be and who I really was when no one was looking. And now it had become something else entirely. The house was there again. Perched on the same hill, outlined in the soft amber glow of its windows. It looked unchanged from the night before, but somehow more alert. The lights inside didn't just shine, they watched. A pulse of warmth that radiated beyond the glass, like breath pressed against the dark. The porch light flickered as I approached, not erratically but with intention, like it had recognized me. I eased the car to a crawl, letting the tires crunch softly over gravel as I drew near. The rocking chair on the porch sat at an angle now, slightly turned toward the road, as if someone had stood and left it mid-motion. And there, near the doorframe, the shadow of someone, shifted behind the curtain. Not moving, just adjusting, as though acknowledging that I'd come back. I didn't stop, though I wanted to. I kept the car moving forward, slowly, eyes locked on the house until the bend in the road pulled it out of view. Even then, I felt its presence lingering behind me like heat from a fire I hadn't stood close enough to feel but too close to ignore. At home, I sat in the dark longer than I meant to. The lights in my apartment stayed off. I didn't move. I just listened, to the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the radiator, the faint sound of my own breath trying not to hitch. I kept thinking about the way the house had looked tonight. The glow in the windows. The porch light. That sliver of movement upstairs that felt less like a person and more like the memory of one. I told myself again that it wasn't real. That stress could do strange things. That memory, when tired enough, could invent entire worlds. But when I closed my eyes, I saw it. I saw the light behind my eyelids, warm and soft and flickering. I saw the door opening in slow motion as if an invitation. I saw the rocking chair stilled, the windows pulsing with a golden breath that never seemed to end. Sleep didn't come. Not really. I drifted, shallow and weightless, into a place between waking and dreaming where the house was always just behind me, close enough to feel but never near enough to touch. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But the next night, I was already turning onto the road before I realized what I was doing. And there it was again. But different. The lights were brighter now. More windows illuminated. The porch seemed longer. The paint on the siding, once dull and gray, had taken on a soft blue hue under the moonlight. And for a brief moment as I passed, I thought I saw something new, something etched into the wood above the door. Not writing. Not exactly. More like a shape, the suggestion of a mark that wasn't there before. The window on the second floor, the one that had been dark the night before, now flickered with light. I saw a figure standing there. Not clearly. Just a shape. Just waiting. My chest tightened. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. But I kept my eyes on that window for as long as I could. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. When I got home, I checked my phone for the photo I'd taken the night before. Nothing. Just a pitch-black image. I adjusted the brightness. No change. I tried again the next day, same result. The house didn't exist on the screen. It refused to. But I knew it was real. It was there every night, glowing just beyond the bend. Unchanged, unmoving, impossibly patient. And each time I saw it, I felt it watching more closely. The space between us narrowing, not in distance, but in invitation. At first, I told myself it didn't mean anything. That I was just driving past to prove it was still there. That I wasn't looking for it, not really. I never stopped. I didn't slow down. But that didn't last. One night, I let the car idle on the side of the road a little longer than usual. Just long enough to feel the quiet pressing in, to let the glow from the hill brush against the windshield like a thought I wasn't ready to finish. The next night, I rolled the window down just a few inches. The air that slipped in was sharp and cold, but beneath it, something else. A strange, gentle warmth that didn't belong to the season. It carried the faint scent of smoke, dry wood, and something older. Something like memory. It drifted in from the hill like breath. And then, a night or two later, I turned off the engine altogether. I sat there in the dark, headlights off, hands still on the wheel. Listening. Watching. Letting that strange glow seep across the grass, across the road, across the space between us. Like it was reaching for me without ever moving. The longer I stayed, the more I could feel it. The house wasn't just waiting. It was learning me. It began to feel less like a place and more like a presence. One that had grown used to me and I used to it. A rhythm developed between us. Me arriving in the dark. Glowing in return. The porch light flickering like a nod. The upstairs window occasionally dark as if giving me privacy. Some space. I started to wonder what would happen if I simply walked up. I don't remember deciding to. I remember my hand on the car door. I remember the way the field felt under my shoes. Damp, familiar, almost soft. I remember the porch creaking under my weight like it recognized me. And I remember standing before the open door. Not surprised. Not scared. Just ready. At the top of the stairs there was a bedroom. The door stood open. The room inside was dimly lit by a lamp on a narrow nightstand, its shade tilted just enough to cast a warped ellipse of light across the floorboards. A bed, neatly made with heavy, old-fashioned quilts, sat against the far wall. The air smelled faintly of lavender and smoke, clean and aged like something preserved too long. And placed carefully at the center of the bed was a photograph. Something in me hesitated before I moved. My body knew before my eyes did. But curiosity carried me closer. I picked it up. My breath caught before I could stop it. It was me. I was standing on the porch of this very house, smiling in soft afternoon light, one hand on the rail, the other resting against the door frame. I looked younger and calmer. But it wasn't a photo I remembered taking. It wasn't a version of myself I could place. And yet it was unmistakably real. Creases in the corner of the picture, light damage in the upper edge, the kind of wear that comes only with time. The photograph didn't feel new. It felt found. A chill slid down my spine as I set it back where I'd found it, fingers trembling as if the image had burned something into me. Then I felt it. The floor behind me shifted. Just slightly. Not enough to call sound. But enough that I knew. I wasn't alone anymore. Something was standing there. I didn't turn to see it. My mind screamed for motion, but something deeper held me still. Not out of paralysis, but reverence. Like being in a cathedral you didn't know you had entered. And then the air changed. Heavier, like it's charged. My heartbeat matched the tempo of the old clock ticking faintly somewhere below. I backed away slowly, carefully, retracing each step, as though noise might wake something that was already very much awake. I moved through the hallway, past the paintings that now felt like windows, down the staircase that narrowed behind me, across the rugs that swallowed sound like breath. When I stepped back through the threshold and onto the porch, I felt the change immediately. The outside air was cold again, the open space of night pressing against my skin like sudden truth. I reached my car without looking back. Not once. The door shut behind me with a firm, unceremonious sound, as though the house had released me only because it had chosen to. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, hands locked on the steering wheel, engine humming beneath me like a heartbeat I could borrow. The road ahead looked no different than it had before, but I knew without question that something had changed. Not just in the house. In me. When I finally drove off, the wheels kicked up dust and gravel, but the sound felt hollow, like I was moving away from something too large to escape. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew sleep would take me right back to that bedroom. That hallway. That photograph. And I wasn't sure I'd leave it again. I didn't go back to the house after that night. At least not physically. Not on that road. I avoided the turnoff entirely, took the longer route through town, surrounded myself with traffic, with people, with noise, just anything to put distance between me and the memory. But distance, I learned, doesn't always matter. Not when something knows the shape of you. It began subtly, as most hauntings do. A flicker in the mirror just at the edge of my reflection. A soft patch of golden light across the floor when no lamps were on. The faintest scent of smoke and lavender drifting through the apartment, strongest when I first came home. And that wallpaper, the one I'd only seen in the house, pale green with gold etching, appeared in the corners of my vision, disappearing the moment I turned my head. I told myself I was tired, overworked, haunted only by imagination. But every night as sleep came slower and less willingly, I knew better. I felt it. That quiet pull beneath the surface of my thoughts. A low, persistent gravity drawing me inward. The house didn't need me to return. It had found another way in. One morning I woke to find dirt beneath my fingernails. Thick, black earth packed into the cuticles, crusted beneath the edges. My sheets were streaked with it. So was the pillow. The smell was unmistakable, wet soil and something older beneath it, like turned roots or bones that had been hidden too long. I stood under hot water for 20 minutes, scrubbing until my skin stung. But the ache beneath the nails remained, deep and pulsing, like I'd been digging in my sleep. I checked the windows. The locks. Everything was secure. There was no sign of entry. No sign of departure. That day, I found a photograph tucked inside the pages of a book I hadn't opened in months. It had no business being there. No crease, no bend to suggest it had ever been handled. It was a picture of a room I didn't recognize. Wood-paneled walls, a single chair near the window. And in the chair, tilted slightly to the side, sat someone who looked like me. Head bowed. Hands folded. Eyes closed. I stared at that photo for far too long, searching for the trick of it. The angle. The lighting. The illusion. But there was none. Just that strange familiarity. The way dreams sometimes give you a version of yourself you've never seen but instantly understand. I set it on the kitchen table hoping to forget it, but I never could. The sounds began soon after. At first, it was just the building settling, or so I told myself. The occasional groan of old wood, the whisper of pipes expanding in the walls. But then came the knock, soft, deliberate, spaced with care. 3 raps. Always just before dawn. Always from a new place. Sometimes the bathroom wall. Sometimes the hallway closet. Once directly beneath my bed. I stopped trying to sleep after that. I began seeing the house in my dreams no longer just on the hill, but stitched into places it didn't belong. A hallway in my childhood home. The break room at work. Reflected in the surface of a spoon. Always glowing. Always watching. And always with that same open door. Welcoming, patient, expectant. Then one evening I stepped out onto my balcony to breathe, to clear my head, to remind myself that the sky was still above me. And that's when I saw it. The house. It stood on the rooftop of the building across the street, perched impossibly yet perfectly, like it had been constructed there brick by brick without anyone ever noticing. Its windows blazed with light. The porch shimmered in that same golden glow I'd seen so many nights before. And on the steps, one hand resting lightly on the railing, stood a figure. It stood still, it was not moving. Not threatening, not beckoning, just present. And the moment I saw it, something inside me gave way. It looked like me. Not an exact copy. Not a reflection. But close, so close it didn't need to be perfect. The posture, the tilt of the head, the outline of the jaw, the quiet way it stood as if it had nothing left to prove. It was familiar in the way a dream version of yourself feels real even when you know something's wrong. We stared at each other across the night. Me above the street and it above the world, held in a silence that felt deeper than sound. I didn't look away. I couldn't. Because somehow in that moment I understood. The house had never been about a place. It had never been bound to the hill. It was something older, more fluid. Something that lived in memory and light and thought. It had entered me the moment I stepped through its door. And now it had spread. Into walls. Into time. Into the rhythm of my breath. It isn't haunting me. It's replacing me. And now, as I sit here writing this in a room that feels too still with shadows in corners, I hear something shift behind me. Not in the hallway. Not in the stairwell. Here, in the room. And I feel it behind me now. Not breathing. Not moving. Just there, waiting in the stillness, in the weight of air that no longer feels like mine. It doesn't need to wear my face. It already knows how I think. How I freeze when I'm afraid. How I try to reason with silence. How I whisper to myself when I'm not sure what's real. It doesn't want to scare me. It wants to replace me. And somewhere deep inside, I think I've already let it.
If you saw that house, the one that only appears at night, would you stop? Or would you keep driving, even if it called your name? Some places weren't built to be visited. They were built to find you. If stories like this follow you into the dark, you might want to stay a while. Subscribe, and I'll be here when the lights go out again.